Hello again. My name is Pastor Greg, and you're watching Transforming the World. This week we are taking a look at the Christian attribute of patience. Patience is a virtue, or patience is a characteristic that should be found in the life of a Christian. As we said, Paul's letter to the church, in the Galatian churches, teaches us that one of the things that the Holy Spirit should produce in our life is patience. We should be patient, we should be kind. But patience is something I wanted to take a look at this week. Again, patience, the definition of patience is the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. I want to take a look at that specific one about being patient in the midst of trouble. Patience in the midst of suffering and troubles. That's the one I really want to take a look at today. So we're going to examine the life of Job and take a look at his response to patience. Again, my name is Pastor Greg, and you're watching Transforming the World. So Job, let's talk about Job. People have talked about the patience of Job. And what they mean is that Job had the ability to not become angry and upset, even though he faced a lot of trouble and a lot of suffering. You know anything about Job? This story is familiar to you. If not, let me share with you what happens one day in Job's life. Job was a guy that lived way back, probably even before Abraham was born. Job lived in that particular time frame, in the time between when Noah and his sons came out of the ark and Abraham comes on the scene. Job was there at that particular time. So one day, this is Job chapter 1, verse 13. It says, "One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting at the oldest brother's house, a messenger arrived at Job's home with this news." It says, "Look, your oxen were plowing with the donkeys feeding beside them when the Sabaeans raided us. They stole all the animals and killed all the farmhands. I'm the only one who escaped to tell you." And while this farmhand was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news: "The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and all the shepherds. I'm the only one who escaped to tell you." While the shepherd was speaking, a third messenger arrived with this news: "Three bands of Chaldean raiders have stolen your camels and killed your servants. I am the only one who escaped to tell you this news." And while that person was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news: "Your sons and daughters were feasting in their oldest brother's home, and suddenly a powerful wind swept in from the wilderness and hit the house on all sides. The house collapsed and all your children are dead. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." Talk about calamity. Talk about hardship. But Job stood up and he tore his robe in grief. Then he shaved his head and fell on the ground to worship. And he said this: "I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will leave naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord." And verse 22 of chapter 1 says this: "In all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God." Wow. Why not? Why did Job not blame God in the midst of all of that calamity? Why didn't he shake his fist at God and say, "Lord, what were you thinking? Why do you do all these things?" But Job did not do that. Why did he shake his fist at God? More importantly, though, is how do we develop this kind of patience in our own lives? I think that's the more important question. How in the world would you and I not be blaming God for all the calamity and hardship that we are facing in our life? I'll tell you the truth, that there is no better teacher in life than experience. Am I right? If you've lived long enough, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. Life lessons are often the most difficult to experience, but they are also the lessons that you and I never forget, and we don't. We simply do not forget those lessons that life teaches us. James chapter 1 The half brother of Jesus Christ. Wow, what a statement he writes here. And in James chapter 1, he says this. The half brother Christ says this. He says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy." Really? But he says, you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Trials and troubles, according to James, trials and troubles help strengthen us and grow our endurance or grow our patience. At some point in our life as a Christian, there's something that happens to us, I guess. And I can only say that this comes through the power of the Holy Spirit in our life. Because this is not natural. It is not natural for a person just when they're facing a trial and a hardship, like Job did, for example. It's just not natural for a person to say, you know what? This was unfortunate, and I would not have wished it upon anyone else, but God be praised. That is not natural. But there is something that happens in a Christian's life as they begin to mature, as they begin to walk more closely with God. The longer you spend with God, the more you will be aware of the depth of His love for you. And you will reach a point, and this happens, and again, as James says, you reach this point as you go through trials and testings. You are actually being strengthened. Your faith is being strengthened because you grow to the point where you realize that what you have experienced is not punishment from God. God's not punishing. He's not disciplining you. He's not hitting you alongside the head and say, "What were you thinking? This is going to be," God's not doing this to us. But these kind of trials and sufferings that we end up dealing with, it's an unfortunate side effect of living in a fallen world. There is, and I really hate to say this, but in this world today, there is pain, there is loss, there is suffering, there are troubles, there are hardships, and they're all around us. And it happens simply because this is the way the world is. The evil is present in this world. Death is present in this world. Sickness is present. Sadness, sorrow, death, and suffering. It's present in this world. And as we are sailing this ship, if you will, on this turbulent ocean, there's bound to be times when we face trials and hardships, simply because that's the way this world is. But the seasoned sailor, or lack of a better description, the Christian who has navigated through life long enough begins to deal with those losses and those trials and those hardships like a seasoned sailor deals with the stormy seas. They've navigated through it time and time again, and they get it. They understand what it's like, and the trials and the hardships don't upset them, don't disturb them, because in the midst of all of that, they hold fast to the depth of God's love for them. And so you reach this point as you mature as a Christian, and you realize that these hardships and the trials that you're facing in life, it's not God smacking you up alongside the head. It's the world being the world. And in the middle of all of that, God's love is unshakable and always present. Not only is God patient with this world and patient with you, but God's love for you it does not waver. It does not diminish. God's very, very slow to get angry with you and I. And so the Christian this is what James is trying to say, the Christian who goes through these times, their endurance or their patience or their faith and their understanding of the depths of God's love for them actually begins to grow through these trials. For those of you who are experiencing your first hardship in your Christian life, I pray for you. It can be very, very hard to live in this world and realize just how violent this world is, how wicked the world is, how tragic the world is. And when you experience that for the first time, it can be unnerving. It can really shake you up. But hold fast to this. Hold fast to this. That God loved you. John 3:16. God loved you so much that he's willing to send his son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross so that you might have everlasting life. And if God was willing to demonstrate, if God was willing to go through that just to ransom you from death and destruction, then no amount of hardship, no amount of trial, no amount of loss, no amount of suffering that you may face in this earth will ever diminish the depth of God's love for you, because he went to such a great length so that you might be called his child. Job didn't have that, I know. Job did not have the sacrifice of Christ to hold fast to. But apparently Job had walked with God long enough. Apparently Job had a deep relationship with God the Father long enough that he recognized that this hardship, the loss and the suffering that he endured, it simply was not within God's character for God to do this. Rather, it was the ugliness of the world. You want to have the kind of patience that Job had? You want to be able to face hardship and suffering in life without allowing your faith to be shaken or broken? Then spend time in prayer, getting to know your Father in heaven. Develop a very deep relationship with God the Father. The better you know God, the more you understand the depth of his love for you. And when you know these things, the more stable you will be when you face trials and hardships of your own. You remain patient through them because you know of God's love. Well, thanks for spending some time with me again today as we've taken a look at patience, another side of patience. Tomorrow we'll take a look at a different attribute of patience, a different way that patience is manifested in the life of a Christian. But for now, my name has been Pastor Greg. I appreciate you spending time with me today, and you've been watching Transforming the World.